3 legendary Amtrak long-distance routes. 3 totally different vibes. Coastal surf, high Rockies, or desert mesas, which one deserves the top spot on your railfan bucket list? Most of us don't have the time, money, or points to ride every long-distance route. So if you're choosing one big scenery Amtrak trip, you want the maximum rail nerd payoff for every mile. Maybe you've already memorized the timetables. You know where the sightseer lounge seats are, and you care way too much about daylight through the best segments. This episode is for you. Today, I'm putting Starlight, California Zephyr, and Southwest Chief head-to-head on what matters to rail fans. Scenery density, daylight timing, rail nerd moments, and how each route feels from the observation car. Let's start with where these trains actually go and what kind of landscape you're signing up for. The Starlight hugs the Pacific coast and Cascades. The California Zephyr rolls through the Rockies and Sierra. The Southwest Chief is all about high plains and desert. 3 legendary Amtrak LDs, 3 totally different vibes. The coastal surf, high Rockies, or desert mesas. Which one deserves the top spot on your railfan bucket list? Before we argue about which route is best, you need to see where these trains actually run. All 3 are classic long-distance Amtrak routes, but they slice through completely different parts of the country. The Starlight is your Pacific epic from Seattle down to Los Angeles with big hits like Puget Sound, the Cascades, and those famous stretches where the tracks run right above the surf. It's one night on the train, lots of ocean and forest and big city bookends. It feels like a West Coast road trip just on rails. The California Zephyr is the Rockies and Canyons heavyweight. Chicago to the Bay Area, 2 nights on board, and a ridiculous amount of mountain time. Climbing out of Denver into the Front Range, threading river canyons in Colorado, then crossing high desert and the Sierra Nevada. This is the one people call America's most scenic train, for better or worse. It's the full marathon. The Southwest Chief is all about the high plains and the desert Southwest. It links Chicago and Los Angeles through Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. Think Raton Pass, mesas, and long runs through empty desert. If you're into Route 66 energy, big skies, and glowing red rock at golden hour, this one's going to speak your language. So on paper you've got coast, mountains, and desert, but railfans care about more than just the postcard. In the next section, I'll break down how each route actually performs where it counts. How much of the good stuff you see in daylight, how intense the ride feels, and how many rail nerd moments you'll bring home. For railfans, it's not just what the train passes. It's when. In this section, I'm looking at 2 things: how much of the route is genuinely scenic, and how well the schedule lines up that scenery with daylight. On the Starlight, the headline act is that Southern and Central California coastline, where the train literally hugs the Pacific for miles, especially between Ventura and just south of San Luis Obispo. Northbound is your best bet. Leaving LA in the morning puts the beaches, cliffs, and surf squarely in daytime. Then, in late spring and summer, you can push that daylight far enough north to catch more of the Cascades and even Mount Shasta if you're up early. The trade-off. There are still stretches of farmland and forests that feel more like nice background than bucket list. So I'd call the scenery density medium-high, but when it hits, it really hits. The California Zephyr is where scenery density gets ridiculous. Westbound out of Denver, you're in the Rockies almost immediately, winding through tunnels, climbing to the Continental Divide, and then spending hours following the Colorado River through one canyon after another. You're back in daylight again for the run over the Sierra Nevada through Donner Pass. High forests and big mountain vistas before you drop toward the Bay Area. Because so much of the prime territory is timed for daylight, westbound Zephyr is about as close as you get to a full day, back-to-back mountain show. The flip side is it's intense. 2 nights, lots of hours where you feel like you have to be in the lounge not to miss anything. On the Southwest Chief, the big payoff is the western half. You've got Raton Pass in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, tight curves through Apache Canyon, and then long stretches of New Mexico and Arizona desert, with mesas and rock formations that feel straight out of a classic Santa Fe or Route 66 postcard. Westbound is the sweet spot for railfans. Daylight over Raton Pass, then you ride straight into a desert sunset and wake up closer to California. The catch is that the other half of the route is mostly Midwestern and Great Plains scenery. It's pleasant, But compared to canyon running on the Zephyr or the Pacific on the Coast Starlight, the density of jaw droppers is lower. So if your priority is non-stop mountain time and daylight, the Zephyr clearly wins this round. If you want concentrated coastal drama in a shorter trip, the Coast Starlight makes a strong case. And if desert skies and Southwest history are your thing, the Chief's western leg might be all you need. Next, let's talk about trip intensity. How these routes feel to actually ride. Nights on board, recovery time, and whether they're better as a one-and-done experience or part of a bigger rail adventure. For rail fans, it's easy to focus on scenery and forget what your body has to do to earn those views. In this round, I'm looking at trip intensity. How many nights you're on board, how hard it is to stay on for the good parts, and whether each train works better as a casual ride or a full-on endurance run. The Coast Starlight is the gentlest of the three in terms of intensity. It's usually one night on the train, with a lot of the headline scenery in daytime and enough downtime that you don't feel guilty stepping away from the window. For a rail fan, it's still a real long-distance experience. You get the ritual of boarding, settling into your roomette or coach seat, doing a full dinner and breakfast on board, and waking up in a completely different landscape. Because it's shorter, it's also easier to bolt this onto a bigger trip, like a cruise, national park loop, or another Amtrak route, without feeling like you've just done a transcontinental ultramarathon. I'd call this the ideal gateway LD. Intense enough to be satisfying, but light enough that non-railfan partners or friends can still enjoy it. The Zephyr is where trip intensity goes to the max. 2 nights on board, a long mileage count, and massive blocks of A-tier scenery mean you're constantly fighting the feeling that you have to be in the sightseer lounge or at a window. Day 1, you're already climbing into serious mountains. Day 2, you're back into big landscapes. If you're the type who wants to photograph everything, this can be exhilarating and exhausting at the same time. Sleep becomes strategic. When do you sacrifice views for rest? Do you duck back to your roomette during filler stretches just to recharge? Railfans handle this fine, but if you're bringing someone who's not obsessed, this can feel like a lot. This is the one I'd treat as the centerpiece of a trip. Plan recovery days at the start and end, and don't stack another long-distance route back-to-back unless you really love being in motion. The Southwest Chief sits in the middle. It's also a 2-night run, so you're committing real time, but the scenery pattern is different. Long, more relaxed stretches through plains and high desert, punctuated by big moments like Raton Pass and the New Mexico mesas. For a railfan, that can actually feel less intense than the Zephyr. There are clear windows where it's okay to collapse in your room, read, or just enjoy the rhythm of the train without feeling like you're missing a world-class canyon every 5 minutes. Emotionally, it's more meditative. Big skies, long horizons, and the occasional burst of dramatic terrain. If you like the idea of being on a classic Chicago to Los Angeles corridor without the constant adrenaline of mountain running, this strikes a nice balance. For partners or friends, it can be easier. They still get a sense of epic trip, but with more breathing room between the wow moments. So, in terms of pure trip intensity, the Coast Starlight is your accessible gateway epic, the Zephyr is the full-blown mountain marathon, and the Southwest Chief is the long, steady desert meditation with a few high drama spikes. Next, let's talk about something railfans argue about constantly. Rail nerd moments, the stations, meets, curves, horns, and all the little details that don't show up in glossy brochures, but absolutely make or break a long-distance run. Scenery is the headline, but railfans know the real magic is in the details. The tunnels, the meets, the curves where you see your own train, those classic stations, and the way the horn sounds in the middle of nowhere. In this round, I'm looking at the intangible stuff that doesn't show up in brochures, but does show up in your stories later. On the Coast Starlight, the rail nerd moments start before you even move. Rolling out of LA Union Station or Seattle King Street feels like stepping into classic West Coast rail history. Curving along the coast and through the Cascades, you get those moments where you can catch your own train in the window. The superliners against surf or snow never gets old. In the lounge, the vibe is very West Coast casual. A real mix of backpackers, cruise passengers, and a handful of folks who can tell you what was on this consist 20 years ago. If you're into tunnels, bridges, and engineering, the Zephyr is your playground. Climbing out of Denver, it's tunnel after tunnel, each exit revealing a new slice of the Rockies. Running alongside the Colorado River, you get that pure rail nerd joy. Horn echoing off canyon walls, rafters waving, and the whole train snaking through rock cuts that look impossible from the highway. In the Sightseer Lounge, the railfan quotient is high. You'll hear people trading notes on which tunnel is next, how late you are versus the timetable, and the best side of the train for each landmark. The Southwest Chief is less about flashy infrastructure and more about heritage. You're literally riding a modern descendant of the classic Chicago to Los Angeles Santa Fe route, with old depots and small town platforms that feel frozen in time. Out on the high plains and in the desert, the horn becomes part of the soundtrack. Long blasts over open country, sometimes with nothing but stars outside your window. Climbing Raton Pass and threading the curves, you get that sense of being on a true transcontinental corridor, sharing the line with freights that remind you this is still a working railroad, not just a scenic toy. So if you live for tunnels, canyon echoes, and a lounge full of rail maps, the Zephyr is going to feel like home. If you want flagship West Coast vibes and iconic terminals, the Coast Starlight has the edge. And if you're chasing that old-school Chicago through LA horn in the desert feeling, the Southwest Chief quietly nails it. In the final section, I'll bring it all together and tell you which route I'd pick for different types of railfans, and which one I'd ride first if I could only do one. We've looked at scenery, daylight, trip intensity, and those little rail nerd details that make a run memorable. Now let's talk about you, the kind of railfan you are, and which route actually fits your style. If this is your first serious long-distance Amtrak ride, I'd start with the Coast Starlight. You get real overnight mileage, legit scenery, and iconic terminals, without the 2-night marathon or the constant pressure to be in the lounge. It's the perfect way to find out if you actually like living on a train before you commit to something as intense as the Zephyr. If you're the type who will happily sacrifice sleep just to chase one more canyon shot, then yeah, the California Zephyr really is your route. It's the most demanding, but also the most consistently spectacular, especially westbound. Think of it as the through hike of Amtrak long-distance trains. This is the one I'd put at the center of a trip, not just something you tack on. If the words Santa Fe and Chicago to LA make your rail nerd heart beat faster, the Southwest Chief is your ride. You're trading some non-stop mountain drama for long, meditative runs through the high plains and desert, plus that feeling of being on a living, breathing transcon route. Pick this if you want big sky sunsets, small town stations, and that horn echoing across empty country at night. If you're bringing someone who isn't a rail fan yet, I'd steer them toward the Coast Starlight or the Southwest Chief. The Starlight is shorter and more varied. The Chief has more downtime between the big moments. Both are easier on civilians than a wall-to-wall Zephyr marathon. For me, if I could only keep one on my railfan bucket list, I'd pick Zephyr. It hits my sweet spot of scenery, vibes, and the kind of rail nerd moments I never get tired of. But this series isn't stopping here. I've got full deep dive episodes on each of these routes. Coast Starlight, California Zephyr, and Southwest Chief, where I break down sample itineraries and everything I wish I'd known before riding. So once you've decided if you're a coast, Rockies, or desert person, hit the playlist, pick your train, and I'll see you in the observation car.